The Lord be with you. All right, we've been going over questions of God's direction and vision and clarity of where God is taking us as a congregation. This is a confusing process, it's a chaotic process. And so I want to do a review of where we've been and how it is that we get there. So I went over this in video number one. This idea of overlapping circles, this kind of Venn diagram where the idea is to get to the center of, we've got kind of this splatter graph of all the experiences we've had, all the troubles that we're facing in the world, all of the motivations of our heart. And we kind of want to find that center ground that gets to the very heart of King of Glory Lutheran Church. And so in the at least the upper right corner of my screen, the green circle, we've kind of got the body of King of Glory Lutheran Church, our King of Glory family. You know, all of our experiences, all of our traditions, all of our history that kind of says, this is what God has equipped us with. This is how God has shaped us. And then down at the bottom in the red circle is our motivations, the things that give us energy, the things that we're excited about, the things that we just say, hey, let's go. And in the blue circle are all the opportunities that God has placed around us. And there's far more opportunities, far more challenges than we can possibly ever deal with as a King of Glory family. So the idea is to find the overlap so that we can say, this is the thing that God has called us to do. And so here's how I've try to direct the conversation. So back in August, we talked about our experiences as a council with Bible studies and smaller gatherings. You know, how were they good? How were they bad? How did you experience God? How did you connect with God? How did you connect with other people through Bible studies and smaller gatherings? From this, I think we started, what was it, 3 or 4 different, Bible studies or groups or gatherings. And people talked about being willing to host or being willing to go. And these Bible studies have, for the most part, continued since then. Then in September, we looked at what the leadership team is responsible for. And I wanted to do 2 things. One is the council is responsible for everything. This is one of my pet peeves, and I'm sure it's one of yours too, but we come at it from different directions, where I've been told that the council's job is to take care of the business of the church, to which I go, what's the business of the church? Is the business of the church not to make disciples of all nations? And then I'm told, well, no, it's our job to make sure that, the grounds are maintained and whatnot, which is true, but we're responsible for everything. How do we get all of that done? Do we just kind of go with the squeaky wheel, or do we say, hey, you know what? The business of the church is to make disciples of all nations. The business of the church is to grow in love for God and one another. The business of the church is to glorify God and make disciples of all nations. I repeated myself. So what are the 2 to 3 things that we have to do which defines God's success for us, that says, yes, we've been faithful to God's calling? Because there's certain things that we can say, if this slides, that's okay. But if this over here slides, that's not okay. Okay, and that's where I want to get to the heart of that circle, the Venn diagram I showed in the first screen. In October, we talked about the common calling of all churches. And so, you're going to come up with things like, we're here to grow in love for God. We're here to grow in love for each other. We're here to make disciples of all nations. We're here to glorify God. That's true of all churches, but what's our unique calling? And so one of the themes that I've heard mentioned from a handful of people is how important our church tradition is and how important our Lutheran heritage is. So in October, I asked the question, what from our church tradition and what from our Lutheran heritage has meant the most to you in growing spiritually and as a disciple of Jesus? And what I was looking for is that upper corner of God's shaping of us. How has God spiritually formed you? How has God nurtured your faith? How have you grown in love for God and each other through our Lutheran heritage and through our Lutheran tradition? Then in November, I asked the question, I try to word this as in many ways as possible. What are the landmines, the hand grenades, the hot button issues, the lightning rods, the sensitive nerves, the broken relationships, the hurts, etc., in case I mention any, in the history of our King of Glory family or in your own personal walk with Christ? Where do we need reconciliation and healing so we can carry no burdens into the future? In other words, let's leave the troubles behind us. Let's learn from them and leave them behind us. And a couple things that I just recall from this. There's been tension between the church and the pastor, repeated over and over again. And I walked into this situation going, oh, okay, interesting. So there's tension between the church and the pastor. How do we put that in the past so that we can partner together in the gospel? And then one person said, this is a paraphrase, do not cut my ministries or my programs, okay? Do not. So again, that sounds to me like a hot button issue. How do we deal with this going into the future, okay? So I've noticed that we don't have them top of mind. Instead, it's kind of like when they come up, then all of a sudden the fireworks start going and the lightning starts striking. And I don't want to be the lightning rod that absorbs all that energy unless I've got people behind me to absorb the energy with me to say, hey, but this is where God is taking us, okay? Then I can handle it. In December, I noted that I have heard three themes mentioned repeatedly. One is home. That is, King of Glory feels like home. King of Glory feels like family. Then our church tradition, especially our Lutheran heritage, has been important to, again, a handful of people. And then our vocation, serving one another. In discussion, this came out to be, having a community presence, the idea that loving our neighbor is important to us. So those three themes, and those were mostly in terms of supporting of local ministries. And so we talked about those three themes, okay? And then in January, I discussed the analogies of a boat and car, trying to give an overview. So let me go over those quite quickly. First of all, with the boat analogy, where are you? Where are you going? And so, we're in a boat called the church, and we're on the water, and we need to get where we're going. And we've got weather going around us, and we don't know where we are, and we don't know where we're going, and we don't know how to get there. So where are we? First of all, plot our place on the map, and then plot the place where we're going, and then let's set the sails to get there, right? And steer a course and get the compass out, and let's head off in the direction so that storms may come and go, but we stay rooted in the direction God is taking to us. The direction God is taking us, okay? The car analogy, which I think is really helpful, though I've noticed all of my analogies are not organic. Jesus's analogies seem to be almost always organic. Organic in the sense of stuff God made, not stuff humans made. So I find this analogy helpful, as in we're all in a car or we're all in a bus together, and we're going somewhere, but where are we going? So the driver of the bus or the driver of the car that is the church is always driven by partners in the gospel. And I shouldn't say partnership, it's partners. Those people partnering together with Jesus and with one another in bringing the gospel message, living out the gospel message, and bringing that gospel to other people. The co-pilot is God's positioning system, our GPS, God's positioning system. It's vision, it's clarity about where God is taking us. So it's that telescope that with the lens nicely focused that says, hey, what do we do? This is what we do as a church. This is why we do it. This is when we know we're successful at doing what we do. The answering those questions is key to getting direction, of saying, oh, hey, recalculating route, we're going in this direction, we need to make a left or a right up here, okay? Or we need to go straight ahead, or we need to go back there. In the back seat is our governance or bylaws, kind of the way we do things, the way we operate as a church, whether this is formal governance or informal governance, how decisions are made. And then our ministries and programs. And note that they're supposed to be in the back seat. That is, the governance and the bylaws are there to serve the partners in the gospel. They're there to serve the vision. They're there to serve the direction God is taking us. They're not there to make decisions for us, but help us guide our decisions in an orderly manner, okay? And again, the governance and bylaws should come after we have the vision. It's kind of why I suggest we kind of put all the bylaws and put all the governance and put it off to the side and say, let's come back to that when we know where God is taking us. The same thing with ministries and programs. The ministries and programs are there to serve the partners in the gospel in taking us where the GPS, God's vision for us, is taking us, not the reverse. And this is where I see churches get in a hang up, is that the car ends up driving backwards. That is, the governance and the bylaws dictate where we're going, and the ministries and programs dictate where we're going, and they dictate how we're getting there. And I always go, wait, shouldn't we be seeking God's direction for where we're going, right? Yes? No? It's almost like a church exists for its ministries and programs, and the church exists for its governance. And those churches, I just got to say, those are churches that are dying churches. There's no way to recover that. Nobody joins a church because you have great governance. Nobody, well, someone may join a church because you have great ministries or programs, but they're there to be served. They're there to consume. They're not there to grow and do God's will. That's a really judgmental statement, but just take it as general direction, not universal truth. All right. So then in February, what event or activity has meant the most in your Christian growth or understanding of who God is? And again, I want you to note why I asked this question back in February. Because God has been shaping and molding you as a Christian, as a child of God. And so what I'm looking for is common ground of saying, hey, this is the way God has been shaping me. This is the way God has been shaping you. That kind of gets us to that part of the Venn diagram where, I'll go back to the Venn diagram, where we get overlapping of, hey, you experienced God through whatever it might be. Whether it was our Lutheran tradition, whether it was in serving and in ministries and programs, or whether it was this, idea of being family. How has that helped you grow in your walk with Christ? And then in March, we went back to the three themes of our Lutheran heritage, our home and family, and serving. And again, I'm looking for the right wording for this, because community presence and loving your neighbor came up. And again, I'm looking for the wording for that and how it is that it captures your heart. So how do we live these values? This is huge for a church, and something I've struggled with my entire life, because someone says, hey, let's do this, and I get all excited and rip roaring and going ahead, and I put a lot of work and a lot of energy into it, and then I go, hey, where are you? You said you wanted to do this. And then the person says to me, no, I wanted you to do it. That's what I meant by we should do this, is you do it. And I can do precious little by myself. So how do we live out these values? How do we live our Lutheran heritage, our Lutheran values? What does it mean that we are home, that we're family? How do we live that out? Is it the fact that on Sunday morning, we don't smack each other in the face? or because we say hi, or we talk about the weather, or is there something more deep rooted in the sense of being family? And then also with serving and our community presence, again, how do we live out these values? And then in my next video, I'm going to talk about what I talked about in April, which is, why did I take this call? Why did I take the call from King of Glory Lutheran Church and accept the call to be your pastor? All right. So we'll take a look at that, and hopefully you're getting a sense of, kind of the direction of bringing all of us individuals together. And it starts with leadership. Okay, that's key. This all starts with leadership, those who lead. We can't expect followers to lead, which is most of our congregation. So I expect the council to lead, right? I expect our leaders to lead, right? And I'm right there with you to lead in this, right? All right, God's peace.